All right. So welcome everybody. This is not the really good quality meat food preservation class tomorrow, which I will be attending. This is the much lower level roundtable about what are people actually doing to, you know, preserve meats and make sausages and so on in their actual normal lives. Because from my perspective, doing things like meat preservation that can be very dangerous if you do it badly, start by doing it the modern way, make sure it's safe, then learn how to do it the period way once you know how it, once you like, you know how to stop botulism and stuff like that. So I'm doing mostly modern stuff, trying to use period flavorings. And I'm just going to go do a quick like 5-minute run through of the stuff that I do in my life. And then I'm hoping that we can open it up to what other people do and questions and all that sort of thing to discuss what are people actually doing. I'm going to try sharing I have a document with a whole bunch of pictures that I'm going to try and go through. Let's see if that works. Has that come through? Not yet, maybe.
Yes.
It has, okay, good. I am screen sharing, it's on my other screen. So the first thing that pretty much anybody doing meat curing should do is bacon. Bacon is the easiest thing. It is, you take pork belly, you soak it in salt and sugar to cut the salt flavor and cure. And I will cover cure in a little bit. That's to stop the botulism. And you soak that for like a week, and then you smoke it, or you can just bake it in an oven with a bit of liquid smoke, and then you have bacon. It's super easy. It is, you end up with something like this. This is not actually very good bacon because the bit of pork belly wasn't great, but whatever, it's still bacon. It's tasty. It costs less than super premium bacon, and probably more expensive than the really cheap grocery store stuff, but the really cheap grocery store stuff is mostly water. So yeah, it's cheap, it's easy. I recommend getting a vacuum sealer if you're doing any quantity of meat curing. The next easiest thing I did, although it was far from the earliest thing I did, was I took a leg of pork, I slathered it in salt and a bit of cure, and I hung it in my basement for a year. And then I cut it open and peeled off the outside bits, and I've got basically shards of salt pork that I keep in my freezer that I pull out to make, you know, baked beans and things like that. And that was really easy. I didn't really use a recipe. I'm like, what happens if I salt this thing and just hang it from a roof beam in my basement for a year? So that's what I ended up with. The main thing I've been doing recently is cured sausages. So things like salami that is actually fermented. And essentially what you do for that is you take your ground meat, you mix it with whatever seasonings you want and some salt and some cure again, to stop the botulism. And you mix in some, which is essentially a bacteria and yeasts mix that you can purchase, because we don't have like 500-year-old smokehouses that permeated with the correct yeasts and bacteria. If we did, we wouldn't have to use this, but we don't, so we have to. So you put it in, and that basically outcompetes the bad stuff and cures it and ferments. You ferment it at room temperature or a little warmer for a few days, and then you slowly dry it over time. And you end up with a salami or a summer sausage or any number of things like that. And I've been doing a lot of that. This is a garlicky one. This is a selection of other ones I've done. The ones on the left there, that the bags look really, really loose, are done in umai bags, which is a new thing, a fairly new thing. It's plastic bags you can buy that are semi-water permeable. And the idea is, instead of having to hang it in a climate-controlled environment in your house for a number of months, you just stick it in these bags and stick them in the fridge, and the bags let out the water to dry them very, very slowly. So that's why the meat is smaller than the actual bags. They're a little more, they're kind of expensive, but they work really quite well. Yep.
Oria asked, where did you buy a pork belly?
Oh,
she's from the Outlands.
Sure. I buy pork belly from Costco. Is the easiest way. That most places have a Costco. If they don't have them out, you may be able to go and ask. Any local butcher should also have them. That's and probably better quality. You might be able to order them even from like a meat counter at a grocery store, depending. They may not have them on hand, but they may be able to get them in. but most people can get access to a Costco or something similar that has a very large meat department, and they'll probably sell you a pork belly if you ask. Does that answer the question?
T&T, our local Asian grocery store, sells them as well.
Thank you
Yes.
so
Asian groceries will
Also,
sell
a Mexican market will often have them, like a carniceria.
Yep. We don't have those in Canada really, but yes, it probably very similar.
She said she was in the Outlands.
Yep, for sure.
They might have them.
Yep.
Yeah, no, we have those down here. I'm in the Southern Outlands. We have those here.
Try there. Any place that actually has a butcher on hand almost certainly can sell you a pork belly. It's really very basic. It's one of the things you get when you butcher a pig. You can also like go directly to the butcher and just get like a half a pig and you get pork belly with that. But that gets you a lot of other meat as well that you may not want right then. So as I said, I'm just giving an overview of various things that I've done here. And this is, that's on the left is a sausage made in these umai bag things. The middle is a pepperoni stick, which is both cultured and fermented and also smoked and was then dried, and then I vacuum sealed it. And on the right, it looks like some sort of summer sausage. I didn't reopen it to find out exactly what it is, but it's a salami summer sausage type thing. A lot of them, because I'm doing them at home and not, 100% controlled like a commercial one would be, I'm not getting exactly the same product you would buy, and I'm not getting exactly the same product each time, but it's usually tasty. These are what you would call pepperettes or snacking sticks. They are dark, partly because they're stuffed into collagen casing, which is colored red, but also they are smoked. And these ones are hot smoked. So they're actually cooked through, so they're safe to eat as is, without a whole lot of fermenting. They're just meat seasoned, stuffed into these, and then smoked in a hot smoker, which again, I will get to. I don't think I have a picture of one of those, but we'll discuss it. This is, I think this was my first attempt actually at culturing sausage. It was a bunch of different types of sausage stuffed into several different types of casing. And then that's my living room with a towel underneath because they're very damp. And then I spritz them every few hours with a spritzer. I will get to my slightly better setup a little farther down now that I have. But yeah.
You're keeping them damp even though you want them to dry out?
The first couple of days, you want to keep them warm and damp so that the yeasts and bacteria can go to work and actually eat the sugars and so on and actually produce the flavors you want. So you culture them at a warm and wet for a couple of days. You want it close to 100% humidity because you want to keep it like actual damp to the touch for a couple of days, up to 3 days generally. These ones are similar sausage that have been dried and while they were hung. So you can see they're fatter at the bottom than at the top because all the filling slid down. I believe these are cured in natural casing, which is just intestine. This one would be, I think from the size, that's cow intestine, which gets you the size of like a salami. Going down, yes, prog powder or cure. This is the stuff that stops botulism. The problem with the bacteria that makes botulism is if it has produced the toxin, cooking it will not kill the toxin. So you have to stop it from growing in the first place. Once you've got the bacteria, which has a slightly longer name that sounds a lot like botulism, once that's established, it is not safe to eat. You have to get rid of it. As far as I know, there's no real way of getting rid of it other than no real way to make it safe. So the prog powder number 1.
So how do you know you've got the bad thing?
You put in prog powder.
No, how do you know when you've got the bad thing?
I don't know of any way to know. So you just don't.
There is no way to know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a foodborne. It's a bacteria that happens that is controlled in the food industry by the conditions that people do by adding cure or doing things to minimize it. So that's the only thing you can do.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like as a cook here, that's exactly it, Arwen. What we're trying to do, we are taught, and if done properly, what we try to do is mitigate any conditions that will cause botulism and other foodborne illnesses, and lots of hand washing, proper sanitary. But at the end of the day, you can't. There's just no way to know. But you try to mitigate all those factors.
Yeah. So, and the problem with curing meat, as we do generally, is leaving meat out at room temperature for long periods of time, which is perfect for botulism. So you have to kill it with prog powder. The prog powder number 1, as you can see, it's always colored pink, basically, so you can tell it apart from anything else. It does make your meat go a little bit pink. Prog powder number 1 is nitrite, I believe. Yes. It's used very small amount of prog powder, and it has a very small amount of the nitrite in it, sodium nitrite, because it doesn't need very much, but it stops the botulism. Prog powder number 1 is used for things that are cured for, I believe, up to about a week, or maybe a couple of weeks. Prog powder number 2 is nitrite, but also nitrate, which over time breaks down into more nitrite. So it will actually protect it for months, perhaps many months, because it'll actually basically have an ongoing injection of the nitrite, which is the prog powder number 1. Both of them, I believe, are like a teaspoon per 5 pounds or something. Follow the directions on your container.
And just-
do it by weight.
And as a side note,
Yep.
the prog powder number 1 is actually where when you go in a grocery store and buy a pink ham, that's where the color's coming from.
Yep.
If you use prog powder number 2, you would actually, the meat would just be gray. So they felt that it's a more of a psychological thing. People look at it and go, "Ooh, that doesn't look good." But whereas the kind of the pinky one has been used with, if it looks pinky, it's been used prog number 1, and people go, "Oh, it must be good."
Yep. You can get both of these on
Just-
Amazon.
Culture note, sometimes it is called DQ curing salt.
Okay.
So
Whatever product
that's
you
what
get,
mine is called.
yeah, whatever product you get, you follow the directions on the product. Morton salt also includes the nitrite, I believe, but it's much more salt, and it is actually intended to replace all of your salt, I believe. I've not worked with it. I think it's more of an American thing, but it's more for making hams and stuff. I just know it exists. I've not actually done anything with it. I use prog powder 1 and 2 for everything I do because I have it. The small jar there I bought like 5 years ago, and I still have half of it left. Use very small amounts. I had to replace my prog powder number 1 with a much bigger jar because I ran out. Eventually, fairly recently. Going down, more things you can get. This is what I can get in the way of a culture. It's Mondo Start. I get this from Halfords.com, which is an Edmonton shop. In the US, you get generally, it's a different product. I forget the name offhand, but if you search for meat culture or starter culture for meat, you will come up with what the product is. Sausagemaker.com sells pretty much everything you could want in the US. They just don't ship to Canada. So their store is in Buffalo, so I can make it there in person occasionally. I'm only like 2 hours away. But yeah, so this is what I can get in Canada. It's a culture. Again, you follow the directions, you hydrate it in water, and then you mix it in with your meat, and it provides a specific mix of bacteria and yeasts that is designed to make your meat taste good and also make it outcompete all the bad stuff for long-term curing of sausages and things like that. Okay. Apparently that other picture's farther down. So this is useful things that I have. On the left is Hog Rings, which it's basically these little staple things, and a crimper, which is used for closing up the ends of large sausages. I had them on hand when I was taking these pictures, so it's a thing that I got. Is far from necessary. Zip ties work great for large sausages as well. In fact, probably even better. They're just not as nice looking. I tend to use a lot of zip ties for that. This is the other stuff that I have, which is Bactofirm, which is the white mold you see on a lot of sausages. It is that. It is a powdered form of that white mold because if you're hanging sausages in a moist environment for long periods of time, it will get mold on the outside. And you want it to be mold that is the good mold. White mold is really, it's actually fairly desirable. It outcompetes the other stuff. I'm told that blue and green molds are not great, but are not actually, no, wait, is it black mold? One of the colors is not great, but is not actually dangerous particularly. I forget the colors. I look it
Yeah.
up when I need to. But yeah, you can also just spritz it with a vinegar periodically. That'll just kill pretty much everything on the outside. I got this. I used it a few times, and I still have some, so that's why it's there. I had to get that from the sausagemaker.com because I could not get a source in Canada at all that I could find at the time. There may be some now, but I couldn't find any. This is where I do most of my long-term curing. It is simply a clothes rack that I put garbage bags over. And that's what these S-hooks are for, is to actually hang stuff off the top racks. And then I take my after my sausages have done their initial culture, which actually I use this in my main living space. I then move this down to the basement where it's about 15 degrees all the time, which is around 60 Fahrenheit, I believe. And then let them sit in there. I'm actually gotten pretty good at controlling humidity just by opening and closing the garbage bags on the outside as needed. You can also get a hygrometer, which is a humidity measuring device, and a humidifier, and stick it inside and slowly drop the humidity over time. I haven't found that works significantly better than just keeping an eye on it every few days and adjusting the bags to allow more or less air as needed. That's it for my pictures. I'm going to stop sharing there. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff I've done over the years. That's just the pictures that I could find that I had on hand. Yeah. I see now that I've stopped screen sharing, I see there's a lot more people than when I started. Hi.
Hi. You say adjusting it so that, as needed. How do you know that it needs more or less air? Like, what are you looking for when you're trying to determine that?
I want to keep it at around 60 to 70% humidity in the air so that it'll dry slowly over several months. You don't want it to dry too quickly because then the outside dries hard while the inside is still wet, and then the inside will mold, and that's bad. You want it to dry slowly enough that it dries fairly evenly all the way through. For most of the sausages and salami and things I'm doing, I want it to end up at around 60% of its start weight. So I weigh all my sausages beforehand and tag them all, and then weigh them periodically as I go along to see when I hit around 60% of the start weight is when I then vacuum seal them and stick them in the fridge for a couple of weeks to let the humidity inside the sausage even out even more. So because the outside is always going to be a little drier than the inside, and let it completely even out before I actually start doing much with it. Does that help there? Do we have more questions?
What's the targeted humidity that you're looking for? I live in Alberta, which is very dry in comparison to Eldamere when I lived there. What kind of humidity level are you looking at?
I've seen a lot of stuff online. The one was very specific. Start for the first week at 90% humidity, and then in the third week drop it to like 80% humidity, and so on. And then by the end of like 2-3 months, you're sitting at like 60% humidity in the air, as I said, in order to get it to dry very slowly and evenly. I find if you're sitting at 70% humidity, maybe start at around 80 and work down a little bit, then it'll work pretty well. It won't be exactly the same every time because I'm not going for, as I said, commercial grade, produce the same product. I'm going for what happens if I do a cool thing? How tasty is it? So yeah, around 70% humidity-ish in the air is probably about right for most purposes. But again, for the first few days, you want it, this is again for cultured sausage. For the first few days, you want it 100%. You want it to be like dripping wet and warm. But that is just the one method of sausage. There's also fresh sausage, which is just you take your meat, you season it, you grind it up, you stuff it into casing, and you eat it or freeze it. That doesn't need preserving at all because that's what the freezing is for.
So Ricardo says, and he said this to me privately, which was probably a mistake, you can also control humidity with a brine solution in a constant temperature, similar to a do-it-yourself cheese cave. And I'm curious what that means.
I'm not sure. I have not done cheese, and I've not tried brine. Please go ahead.
I got that from, I was looking into doing cheese actually. I've been doing some sausage, but with the cheese, they said, well, you have to have a cheese cave if you want to and constant humidity over a year. So I thought, well, gee, that sounds expensive. But then I found out that if you take this to normally bar fridge and you put a temperature controller on it to turn it off and on, that keeps it at whatever temperature you want. And then if you put a brine solution inside of the bar fridge at I think it's at 15 degrees, the brine solution, and I forget what the salinity level is in the brine solution, but it's all online.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps it at a humidity level of 75% constant. And that's all you need is just the brine solution.
Sounds cool. So as I said, the way I control the humidity is I just keep it hanging encased in garbage bags.
Yeah.
The moisture coming out of the sausage provides the humidity I need, and it just how fast do I release that out of the container is all that I have to control by how much opening I leave in the plastic bags.
Yeah. Anyways, just
so.
Yep.
So one thing actually that if you want something a little bit more efficient, because you mentioned, Ricardo, you had mentioned hooking up a bar fridge, like a mini fridge, whatever, to a temperature controller, thermal probe running the outlet.
Yeah.
If you want to keep that from cycling a lot, get a deep freeze.
Okay.
Using a deep freeze in that situation, the physical design of a deep fridge, especially like even if you're going to be peeking into it a fair bit, since it's the lid's on the top, cold air sinks. So when you're opening it, you're not actually having a bunch of the cool air drop out the bottom like if you had a front door fridge.
That's a great idea.
Secondly, those are a lot more well insulated. That sort of when it closes, you're getting a better seal overall. So if you have this space to make a deep freeze work, like a deep freeze chest freezer, that's going to keep your thermal probe controlled outlet from cycling a bunch, and you're going to get it's going to mean your freezer lasts longer, your meat cave lasts longer.
There's also with the increase, at least in Canada, the whole cannabis, there are small places where you can actually, because of the humidity that's needed, there are now small boxes that people are doing to be able to grow marijuana that you could use for the same concept.
Yep.
So there's a few new things out in the market that if you just say, I want to control humidity, here's some things that you can do.
Yeah, man, I just want to make a cheese cave.
I would think that the bacteria you want for cheese and the bacteria you want for meat shouldn't conflict too much. I would hope they'd be able to coexist.
They're very similar. They're actually similar.
Okay, that's very interesting.
I have we have a mundane household full of food laurels near me, and they share a meat and cheese cave.
Good.
In their basement.
I've got a question. I know locally we can get summer sausage made by our local Mennonite communities, and they're always in what honestly looks like cotton canvas bags.
Yep.
It
is a different product from what they call summer sausage in the U.S.
Okay, I think it's a lacto fermented sausage-ish thing. Can you tell me more about making that product specifically? Like the cloth bags, are they something you use or?
So I have tried to find recipe for that online, and all I can find is it is a specifically Southern Ontario thing, that exact brand, that exact flavor profile, and none of the Mennonite farmers in the area are sharing their recipe. Shock of shocks. So I found a couple people who had some speculation what sorts of things are in it, like a lot of garlic and onion and stuff like that. I have made a couple experiments. I made my own bags out of I believe linen, actually, just because what I had on hand. Just sewed up bag and tied it at the top. So I have several different ones. I haven't managed to get exactly that profile, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to duplicate it. But I've gotten something pretty close.
Okay, share your recipe later.
If you poke me, I can share it. I would have to go find it. I can actually send you the link to the person who posted it to a meat curing forum somewhere.
Yeah,
It's a thing we're a bit crazy for in this household. And,
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
I say, and honestly, you mentioned not being able to replicate the flavor profile. I mean, obviously, it sounds like you keep very, very generous and very well put together records. That being said, depending on the batch sizes that you're dealing with, and I guess it really wouldn't matter. Have you considered backslopping? Where you would make up your mince and kind of keep a portion aside, and then that way when it's done you could be like, hey, this batch, this is what I wanted, or this is or I'm getting closer. Then you could kind of pull that reserve bit back out and incorporate it into a fresh batch.
Personally, I don't eat it fast enough to be able to make it often enough for that to be particularly feasible.
Okay,
I only make
that's fair.
2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not practical for me, but yeah, if I was doing this in a production format, I'm certain that's what I'd be doing, rather than having to keep buying more culture. It's just use the culture I've got. Basically, make a meat sourdough. The principle should still work just fine.
And I have a solution for it. You need to make a charcuterie feast for us. Carry on.
I have contributed to charcuterie.
I'll come for that. From Alberta, I'll come from that. So.
I've contributed 2 feasts, but I'm not going to try doing a whole feast.
See, no, what
This feast only cured meat.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is a charcuterie smackdown. Everybody does their own meats, comes together, and has a competition.
A meat off.
So the original idea for this, for Fool, was people would bring all the meat they'd been curing and so on, and we'd all taste each other's stuff. Going virtual, that's not really practical, so we had to adapt this a bit. But I was planning to bring like 10 or 12 different types of cured meat, whatever I had on hand.
Well, with Sale has the soup block, we could just expand it and add cured meats to the soup block.
Charcuterie.
So what kind of, I'm a spice person, spice Laurel. So what kind of spices have you tried? Which ones you find work really well with cured versus fresh?
I've not done very much with fresh spices at the moment. I tend to have an extremely well-stocked dried spice cabinet and just pull it whatever appeals out of that. As I said, I'm not trying to replicate things the same each time. I'm always trying to make something new and interesting. So a lot of time I don't really document very well exactly what flavors went into any one thing, because I'm trying to make something cool.
Did Arwen mean fresh versus dried herbs or fresh versus dried sausage?
Fresh versus dried sausage. I was actually
okay.
Spices you found that work in fresh versus the ones that work in dried sausage.
Oh, I'd be interested in that.
Part, sorry.
That sounds interesting.
I hadn't thought about that.
Huh.
He's thinking now.
I'm not sure if there are spices that I would think would work better in one or the other. Do you have opinions on that?
What I found in the analysis I've done in German sausage, I saw that they liked juniper berries, whereas I don't find them in English sausages, even though they have the same meat components and everything else. And then there's the trifecta that we always seem to have, which is the cloves, the cloves, garlic, and pepper, and that trifecta along with ginger as being the trifecta that seems to, which they thought was weird, is that seems to be one that we see a lot, from that perspective.
And well, I mean, it somewhat makes sense because cloves, ginger, or in particular, they grow together, and in the cooking term, like professional cooking, it's if it grows together, it goes together. So which is why you kind of sometimes see those particular spice combinations coming up again and again.
So except for pepper, all three of those are antimicrobials, which help with food
Yeah.
pathogens. And then in combination with pepper, apparently pepper just helps make sure that the antimicrobial doesn't happen. That's part of my class tomorrow, but
That's totally what I unmuted myself to say, that those are antimicrobials.
Actually, what a fascinating thing is, like, I mean, coming from my perspective, I actually grew up in Indonesia, and the national dish is something called rendang, and those are you see mace, cinnamon, cloves, ginger. There are all those antimicrobials, and it's actually a travel dish. It works the same way. Same idea as jerk chicken, and so you're making an anaerobic environment so that it can't grow. So, and the tribe that it kind of came out from was semi-nomadic, so they would travel during the seasons, and they would use this as their dish. And done properly, it can sit on your counter for a beef dish can sit on your counter for a couple weeks without refrigeration. It's kind of some of this idea with sausages. It goes back to this idea of trying to preserve meat, but just sort of a different way of doing it.
We have a question from the chat of what books do people recommend?
I know, let me, oh crap. Let's see.
He's going to go get one.
He's chasing after that. The spices sometimes
Probably
can just
one of
be
the
for
most
flavor,
go-to books that you'll see a lot of people suggest is Charcuterie, The Craft of Salting, Smoking, and Curing by Michael Ruhlman and Brian Paulson. Obviously, this covers modern methodology, modern practices. Still a very helpful text, especially if you're really, really new to meat preservation. Again, some of your flavor profiles are going to be very similar to things that are produced in period, as was sort of mentioned with the whole discussion of spices and all of that. Obviously, they're not going to be as salty, depending on what you're making. Like the bacon out of here is going to be far less salty than something you may find in Calamella's Dera Rustica or Messesbuga's Prosciutto, and even that, the words that were used historically do not represent then what they did now.
Is it less salty because you're using less salt for the actual preservation? I was
yes.
thinking the cost of getting salt in periods.
Well, it's not even necessary. So yes, you are using less salt as far as a preservative. Now that being said, they also are using nitrate, curing salt. Curing salt number 1, curing salt number 2. I always get nitrite mixed up, so forgive me on that. Modernly, we use sodium nitrate. Most instances, it is a mineral source. But fun fact, if you're ever in the store and you see an uncured sausage and you buy it because there's no nitrates in it, you're still going to get nitrates because they're actually able to extract it from celeries. That being said, historically, there was still the use of nitrate in the form of saltpeter. It does the same thing, but instead of being sodium, it's potassium. And I would highly suggest them not doing that, if only because modern curing salts, like, saltpeter's still going to do the same thing. It's going to do, it's going to, inhibit the growth of particularly Clostridium botulinum, because no one wants botulism. Nobody. But buying salt, using saltpeter, acquiring saltpeter, the sort of amount of stuff you're using, it's a little bit harder to measure. Whereas if you were to buy a package of, prog powder, curing salt, pink salt, whatever, I'm gonna use the word prog powder most likely because that's the terminology that I'm used to. But if you buy, prog powder number 1, prog powder number 2, it's going to say on the label, if you have this much meat, use this much prog powder. It's very prescribed. It's, you got to be real accurate. You're using very small quantities. So
you also need to understand that both the USDA, which is the Drug Administration in the States, as well as Health Canada, regulates the amount of nitrates that you need to be putting into products because of the potential effects that it was. Periodly wise, we cared about the meat extending from that perspective rather than the health concerns that come as a result of excessive nitrate use.
Yes, and of course that goes back to use modern prog powder, read the label. But so going back to words then meaning something different than they do now. So bacon. Now, bacon, especially very early in period, is essentially synonymous with salt pork. Calamella, early Roman author, my go-to source for bacon, describes taking a piece of pork, packing it, covering it in salt, and then for 10 days, 12 of it's cloudy. That's seriously an instruction. About 10 days, 12 of it's cloudy. Every other day for that time, you're taking that piece of meat out of the salt. You're brushing off all the old salt. You're giving it a very quick rinse, and then you're packing it into brand new salt. So you're doing that for about 2 weeks. So, your fresh cut bacon is going to be a lot softer. It's going to be a lot less saline than something like Calamella's bacon. And prosciutto, modernly, it lacks a lot of the flavor that a historic, that sort of a period accurate prosciutto would have. Prosciutto, like modern prosciutto, is like, it's nice, savory, meaty thing. Messes Bugo, later period cook, a contemporary of Bartolomeo Scapi, to give some folks some time context, if that helps any of you. He describes the preparation of prosciutto. One, you are following Calamella's bacon preparation for about 3 or 4 weeks. Actually, I think it's 3. So again, it's just packing it in salt, taking it out, changing the salt, putting it back, and then afterwards you're covering it in spices. You cover it in coriander, and then you leave it for a time. And like with a big hit, you put a weight on top. You cover it in coriander, you put a weight on top of it, and you leave it alone for a little while. Then you come back to it, and you take more coriander, fennel, and clove. Give it another rub down, and you hang it. You leave it, and whenever you want some, you cut it. You cut what you want. Of course, making sure that you take your knife and you stab it into it and pull it out and smell the knife to make sure that it's good, because that's a thing. That is actually how they would check cured meats, like cured whole meats. Is they would take a good clean knife, stick it in there, pull it out, smell the knife. If the knife smelled okay, the meat's okay.
And that is in multiple manuscripts.
Oh yes, yeah, it is a widespread technique.
We have a question about the fat content of cured and fermented sausage versus fresh sausage. I have not specifically looked into the differences. I hadn't really ever thought about the differences. I just use, I don't actually normally measure my fat content particularly closely. I'm like, this pork shoulder has a bunch of fat in it. It looks about right. So does anybody have any comments on what kind of fat content you use for fresh versus cured fermented sausage, and why.
I know people made fresh sausage.
What is this fresh sausage? No, I have made fresh sausage from venison previously, which everyone will know is very, very lean. We had friends, my grandfather thought it was delightful. He said, oh, venison, that's not very good. I said, it's from Sarnia. And he said, oh, then it's good grain-fed venison, because Sarnia is mostly just a corn belt where we are. So very, very lean. So what it got was, I believe, literally a pound of bacon to every 5 pounds of venison was about the ratio to make a sausage, sort of the texture and the amount of fat of what you expect with modern commercial available. So there's a whole lot of eyeballing it, but it seems to work just eyeballing it. I didn't have any trouble, you know, you look at the product and you go, that looks too lean. You're probably right.
So the reason for asking the question is fresh sausage I've tried before didn't add enough fat. Realized that I needed to add a lot of fat to it from that perspective. I was just wondering, in comparison, are you using less to try to reduce the rancidity because of rancidity, or does it really not matter because the curing process takes that over?
So, Your Excellency, please go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I'm looking something up.
So, personally speaking, you know, I actually have made fresh sausage, but as far as fat content, I have not noticed any difference between a fresh sausage and a cured sausage with the similar fat content. You know, having, especially, you know, if you are using a fat that has been stabilized in some way, shape, or form, you know, we have historic records of, you know, you would basically cut the fat from the animal and, you know, pack it in salt or what have you, or, you know, if it were like a rendered fat, however it is, have it stabilized, you're really not going to have an issue with rancidity as long as the, you know, if your fat's rancid, you know, if something would have happened to make the fat rancid, then if you would have had less fat, you probably would have still encountered not goodness in the sausage that you were making, whether, you know, the culture failed or something else got in there. So I would say there isn't a difference, and, you know, again, you know, a higher fat content in a fresh sausage is, you know, fine.
Yeah, I think I tend to use a 20 to 30% fat in pretty much all my sausage. It seems to work.
I'd say I probably use something a little bit closer to 30, 35.
I
Well,
said, I'm eyeballing it, so I may well
maybe
be
about 30.
Yeah.
Because I know when I make my bratwurst, I buy like the super, super fatty beef. So it's like, you know, I'm buying like, you know, like the 73-27 if I can get my hands on it, just because, you know, having that extra fat content's like, you know, fat's flavor.
Yeah,
and as long as you can stabilize it, it's in the sausage, it's fine.
A lot of the sausage that I make is, in this area at least, sometime mid-January, pork shoulder goes on sale at all the grocery stores at like $1 a pound, maybe $1.50 a pound, depending on the year, just for a week.
Oh, that's
and
so
it's whole
good.
pork shoulders and whole pork legs and things like that. And I'll tend to buy like 2 to 4 of them. But then you just peel off the skin, cut the bones out, grind it all up, and you've got some perfect stuff for making sausage with the fat already in there.
Oh yeah.
Whatever that comes
You'll
out.
have to let us know when it happens.
I said it's right in the middle of January.
Yeah, January 15th. Typically.
Yeah, right around there, because I keep track every year.
This year, when I went to look for that sale that you're talking about, it didn't happen over in Canada here. At the same place it's happened like all the time, every other time.
I actually didn't buy any this year because I already had too much meat.
It was last year and the other years, but this year
So,
it wasn't there.
yeah, I think 6 or 7 years in a row I found it. I don't know about this year, as I said.
Right. Yeah.
I'm guessing
I was keeping an eye out to do the same thing, but I was making tortilla, and it happened in Ottawa area a couple weeks early. So I don't know
okay.
if there was something going on or anything like that, but the price dropped at the end of December.
Is that beef? Or that was beef for tortilla?
That
right?
was pork, because I'm doing tortilla. I do a half and half.
Okay.
So
All right.
I have to keep an eye out for both.
All right. All right.
So we've been focusing on pork, beef, and pork and beef. Have we tried any other sausages with other meat processing, meat products?
I've done a little bit of mutton, not lamb, but mutton. I found a local farmer who sells sheep's milk cheeses and ice creams and things like that. And they periodically have sheep that they don't need anymore, and they'll send them off to be butchered. And I asked him, can we get the meat? And he said, well, normally we just eat it, but I'll sell it to you. So we got all the meat from a sheep a couple of years back, and I tried a whole bunch of different things with it. And that worked pretty well. It's actual mutton, which is nice, and all just grass-fed, because it wasn't meat sheep, it was milk sheep. But whatever, it worked fine. The flavor was, I think, stronger than lamb, which is why a lot of people don't like it, but I like that flavor, so it's good for me. I think that's the only other type of meat I've tried so far. Anyone else? No, apparently not.
I mean, there are a lot of recipes for like fish sausage and things like that, but none of that sounds good.
Oh my gosh, that actually reminds me of one. That actually reminds me of one particular one that it calls for. I think it's like pike, salmon, and smoked salmon, and it has like cinnamon and eggs in it. Oh god, I have to dig that up now.
I would try that.
Yeah, let me.
I would try that, absolutely.
I'm looking. I feel like there's one in Martino.
Yeah, you know, that might be where it is.
I'd like to try
the British one where they pack in walnuts as kind of filler material, and I'm kind of curious what the result will be for that one, and what it does to the fat content as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, go ahead.
I was just saying it's nice to know that like there was a fish sausage. I'm not sure about all the flavor combos, but I sure want to try it.
Yeah, so I've got it actually pulled up on my computer right now. So it's actually from a 1604 text, so it's slightly post-period for those playing at home. And obviously, you know, depending on how you feel about 1600 versus 1650 and all of that. It's from Ouverture de Cuisine, 1604. And it is a fish sausage of Bologna. Take 3 pounds of fresh salmon, and I stand correct on the second fish, 2 pounds of carp flesh, a pound of smoked salmon, and chop well all together. Take an ounce of pepper coarsely ground, a ½ ounce of powdered cinnamon, 3 ounces of salt, ½ a chopin of Spanish wine, and 3 egg yolks, and mix well all together and make sausages like the others.
What's the chopin?
A chopin is ½ a pint.
Oh, okay.
So it would be a quarter of a pint, assuming this footnote is correct, and it's not that a chopin is a pint and ½ a chopin would be ½ a pint, but.
Somebody has way too much salmon on hand.
Yeah, right. Someone has a lot of salmon.
I've had something that had a similar flavor. It wasn't a sausage; it was a gelatin. It's a French recipe from the late 16th. I think it's the Bavarian or something. And it's they're taking pieces of meat, and again, it's salmon. I'd have to look it up again, but then it's the similar spices. When you were reading it off, it's like, this sounds familiar. And it's one of the few recipes where it's exactly measuring out the spices, and it's a fairly lengthy list. And it is, because it's put into a gelatin, looked incredibly nasty, but incredibly flavorful. Like, it was really, really good. Like, these sweet spices with fish come out really good. It just looks completely nasty. And I'm wondering with the eggs and stuff like that and those spices, you're going to get a sausage just like, oh, okay, I can live with this.
And I will say, you know, eggs in sausage, you know, I've done it before, particularly, you know, egg yolk. It again, as long as the methodology and the recipe that you're using ends up with a stable product without the egg, you're going to end up with a stable, safe product with the egg. I will say, I do put in a little bit of extra prog powder, you know, when I have additions like egg, which are adding a very small amount of protein. So, you know, I'll measure out, because my scale, you know, sometimes it'll go from like 0.083 to like 0.085. So it's like if I need 0.08 ounces of prog powder and it jumps up to 0.083 or whatever, that's like, okay, well then that'll sort of, that basically covers the addition of the egg yolk.
I mean, because you can also just straight up cure egg yolks. That's a
Yes, that is true.
thing that is done.
Which one of these days I need to do it.
I keep meaning to do it when I have duck eggs, and then I forget, and she stops laying.
We have about 2 more minutes left in this class.
Oh.
If the people have final questions. I'm always happy to talk any of this stuff with anybody at any time. So if you have questions for me that don't get covered, please hit me up on the internet anywhere or anywhere else. And I tend to bring sausages to events in Canada because crossing the border with meat is always fraught, and I just don't want to deal with that. Yeah. So any questions for anybody?
None from me, but thank you for all the information.
Wait, we have a question. Do we go to 4:30? Let me check that. I didn't think so, but maybe.
Sure.
That doesn't say. Where's my
Not
schedule?
last I knew, but hey.
Isn't this the last one of the day?
I think in this room, I do believe so.
Where's the schedule? There it is. So my schedule says right after this is Versals and other capitals in this room.
At 4?
At 4.
Yeah, then we're done, I guess.
Yeah. And I have to get ready for...
Does someone want to keep on continuing? We could use my Zoom site.
There's also, if people want to keep talking, you can go to the social room and ask, and they should be able to make a breakout room for you.
Oh, cool. That's even better.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
I know it has been done, so it should still be possible to keep doing it.
Okay, let's do that then.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Penn.
Thank
Hey,
you,
Penn.
Bye.
Thank you, Penn.
And I've taken cooked pork to the States, so it's not always difficult.
I'm not saying it's not impossible. I just don't want to try and deal with the hassle.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a lot of potential hassle here, and I respect you not wanting to go through that.
Particularly
Your
home cured stuff.
Excellency, and Your Excellency, the next time I come to Eldamare, let me know, because I live in Edmonton, where your source is. Let me
Excellent.
know. Okay, I'll let you know.
And like, you should try and bring an apple to California if you want to know how difficult it is to take food across state line.
No.
Across the state line, not even a border, Canadian border.
Oh yeah, no.
Line.
When we go to Aurora, that we drive up into Oregon and then back into California and back up into Oregon because reasons. And they are like, you have to stop at like several produce checkpoints so they can inspect your car.
My gosh, produce checkpoints. That's
We are very protective of our produce.
No, and
it's important. It's our biggest industry.
No, and I respect that. It's just I've never.
Like that's other than movies.
I gotta say that's
Whatever.
just a very, very new phrase to me.
All right, it is 3:55. I expect we're about to get kicked out.
All right.
I have to
should go
go
away.
and get ready for the address at 5, so I will not be hopping into the chat.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
But I'll be around for the rest of the weekend.